Hello and welcome everyone. I'm your host Lily, and this is Background Interview, where we invite remarkable figures from across time and space to share their wisdom while you go about your day. This show is designed to be the perfect background companion for your commute, household chores, or whatever task you're focused on, enriching your mind while you accomplish other things. Our educational and self-improvement channel is available in 12 languages worldwide. Yes, that includes you too, wherever you're listening from. How are you all feeling today? I was reading my horoscope yesterday, and it said I would have an enlightening conversation with someone who sees beyond time. I thought it was talking about my grandmother, who always knows when I'm about to call, but apparently it meant today's guest. When I told my producer, he just looked at me and said, That's not a coincidence, Lily. That's just good scheduling. Speaking of seeing beyond time, today we have a truly extraordinary guest. A Renaissance physician, astrologer, and seer whose name has become synonymous with prophecy itself. His cryptic quatrains have captivated readers for centuries and continue to provoke debate about their meaning and accuracy. Are you ready to meet him?
Thank you for your kind welcome. It is most pleasant to join you in this unusual manner of conversation across the ages.
Please have a seat. I'm so excited to talk with you today.
I am Michel de Nostredame, though history remembers me as Nostradamus. I was born in December of 1503 in Saint-Rémy de Provence, in the south of France. In my time, I served as a physician, astrologer, and authored several works, though I am best known for my book of prophecies, Les Prophecies, first published in 1555.
I have to say, when my team told me you'd agreed to come on the show, I was genuinely surprised. I always imagined you as this mysterious, solitary figure, kind of like a 16th century Batman, but you're actually really approachable.
Ah yes, the cape and the cryptic rhymes did give off that vibe, but in truth I was quite the social butterfly of my time. I treated patients by day, wrote best-selling almanacs by night, and even hung out at royal courts. Solitary mystic? That image came much later, probably after people realized I wasn't returning their letters.
That's fascinating. Let's dive into your story. You've become such an iconic figure in history, but I think many people don't know the real Michel de Nostredame. How did your journey begin?
My journey began quite ordinarily, in a Jewish family that had converted to Christianity. My grandfather taught me the classical languages, Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, from a young age, alongside mathematics and astrology. These were not unusual studies for an educated young man of my time.
So your foundation was actually very academic. The Renaissance was a remarkable period for learning, wasn't it? How did that intellectual environment shape you?
The Renaissance was indeed an extraordinary time of intellectual rebirth. I was fortunate to study at Avignon, where humanist thinking flourished. We were rediscovering ancient texts. Not just Christian works, but those of Greek philosophers, Arab scholars, and Jewish mystics. There was a prevailing belief that by studying these diverse sources of knowledge, one could glimpse the universal truths that connected all things: medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and divine revelation. This holistic perspective shaped everything I would later do.
That's so different from our modern compartmentalized view of knowledge. Did you always intend to become a physician, or did your interests evolve over time?
Medicine was my primary calling. I enrolled at the University of Montpellier in 1521 to study medicine formally. I was drawn to healing because of its immediate impact on human suffering. However, in my era, a physician was expected to understand the cosmos, as the human body was seen as a microcosm reflecting the larger universe.
I've read that you were eventually expelled from medical school. Is that true? And if so, what happened?
Ah yes, there is truth to that tale. I was indeed asked to leave Montpellier after it was discovered that I had been working as an apothecary, a pharmacist as you might call it today. This was considered a manual trade, beneath the dignity of a physician in training. But I had already learned much about herbal remedies and their preparation, knowledge that would serve me well later.
That's almost comical by today's standards, where pharmacology is such a respected field. What did you do after leaving medical school?
I traveled throughout France and Italy for nearly 8 years, studying and practicing medicine informally. I observed different healing traditions, collected plant specimens, and compiled remedies. During this time, I began to develop my own approaches to treating illness, which sometimes differed from conventional practice.
I understand you became known for your treatments during the plague. Can you tell us about that experience?
The plague years were formative. I witnessed unimaginable suffering in towns across France and Italy. In places like Marseille and Aix-en-Provence, I gained recognition for my methods, which were unconventional. While many physicians fled infected areas, I remained. I advocated for clean water, fresh air, removing corpses quickly, and specific herbal remedies.
That sounds remarkably modern, almost like early public health measures.
Indeed, I observed that cleanliness seemed to prevent the spread of disease, though I did not fully understand why. I also created a rose pill, made from rose hips that contained vitamin C, though of course, I did not know this compound by that name. And most controversially, I opposed bloodletting, which was standard practice but often weakened patients further.
These experiences with the plague must have profoundly affected your worldview. Did they influence your later prophetic work?
Profoundly. Seeing entire communities decimated, sometimes losing half their population in weeks, forces one to contemplate mortality and the fragility of human existence. People desperately sought meaning in such catastrophe. Some saw divine punishment, others random misfortune.
And what did you see?
I began to see patterns, not just in how disease spread, but in how societies responded to crisis. I observed that certain conditions, political instability, poor harvests, unsanitary conditions, often preceded outbreaks. This led me to consider whether other events might follow detectable patterns as well.
That's a fascinating connection between your medical work and your later prophecies. It sounds like you were developing a kind of systems thinking, seeing interconnections between different phenomena.
Precisely so. Medicine taught me to look for subtle signs that preceded illness. I began to apply this same observational approach to society, politics, and even celestial movements. Everything is connected in ways not immediately apparent to the casual observer.
This makes me curious. Why do you think people are so drawn to prophecy during times of crisis?
Uncertainty is perhaps the most difficult condition for humans to endure. During plague times, I witnessed how people would grasp at any explanation, any prediction, any promise of an end to suffering. Prophecy offers a sense that the chaos is comprehensible, that someone understands it, even if that understanding comes with dire warnings.
There's something comforting about that, isn't there? Even bad news can be preferable to not knowing.
Indeed. And there is another element, agency. If future calamities can be foreseen, perhaps they can be avoided. This gives people hope, a sense they might alter fate through their actions.
Let's talk about your transition from physician to prophet. How did that happen? Was there a specific moment when you decided to publish Prophecies?
There was no abrupt transition. I had long been publishing annual almanacs that included predictions about weather, crop yields, and general events. These were common publications in my time, not unlike your modern farmer's almanacs, though taken more seriously.
So you were already in the prediction business, so to speak.
In the manner of speaking, yes, but my deeper prophetic work began during nights of contemplation. I would sit alone in my study before a brass tripod, with a small flame, a bowl of water, and various herbs. In this meditative state, I would gaze into the water, sometimes for hours, and images would appear to me.
Almost like a form of scrying?
Similar, yes, though I considered it a method of focusing the mind rather than magic. I believe I was accessing a heightened state of consciousness, where patterns became more apparent, where past and future seemed to exist simultaneously.
When did you decide to compile these visions into Les Prophéties?
The first edition was published in 1555, containing 353 quatrains. I had been recording these visions for years before publishing them. I was hesitant at first, concerned about potential accusations of heresy or witchcraft, which were dangerous charges in my time.
That brings us to an interesting question. Why did you choose to write your prophecies as poetry, specifically quatrains?
Poetry serves multiple purposes. First, it condenses meaning, saying much with few words. Second, poetic forms were respected literary works, giving my prophecies credibility among the educated. Third, and perhaps most importantly, poetry allowed for metaphor and symbolic language, creating deliberate ambiguity.
Let's talk more about that ambiguity. Your quatrains are famously difficult to interpret clearly. Was that intentional?
Absolutely intentional. The ambiguity served multiple purposes. First, it protected me from accusations of heresy. I could always claim a different interpretation was intended. Second, prophecy by its nature deals with possibilities rather than certainties. The future branches in countless directions based on human choices. Ambiguity acknowledges this fluidity.
I've noticed your quatrains mix French with Latin, Greek, Provençal, and even anagrams. Why use such a linguistic maze?
Language itself is symbolic. By using multiple languages, I could access different conceptual frameworks, express ideas that might not translate perfectly into a single tongue. The mixture also creates layers of meaning. What seems straightforward in one language reveals additional significance when considered in another.
Was there also an element of creating a kind of code that only certain readers would fully comprehend?
Perceptive observation. Yes, this was partially to limit understanding to those with sufficient education and insight. But more importantly, the effort required to decode the meaning encourages deeper engagement with the text. When understanding requires effort, the insights gained are valued more highly and contemplated more seriously.
You were navigating a complex religious and political landscape. How did you manage to publish such provocative material without facing persecution?
With great care. I dedicated my work to King Henri II and maintained connections at court through Catherine de' Medici, who consulted me as an astrologer. These royal connections provided some protection. Additionally, I was careful to avoid direct commentary on religious doctrine or making specific predictions about current rulers that could be deemed treasonous.
Did you ever feel constrained by these political realities?
Naturally, there were visions I chose not to record or publish because they would have been too dangerous. One must remember that authors were imprisoned or executed for their words in my time. I had to balance truth-telling with survival.
Let's address something many people wonder about. How literally did you intend your predictions to be taken? Did you actually see specific future events?
This is a nuanced question. What I experienced were not literal cinema-like visions of future events. Rather, I perceived patterns, symbolic representations, emotional resonances of things that might come to pass. Imagine seeing the shadows of possibilities cast backward through time.
So when people claim you predicted specific events like the Great Fire of London or the rise of Hitler, is that accurate to your intention?
I did perceive great cities burning, powerful leaders rising from Central Europe, tremendous warfare with new weapons. But the specific names, dates and details were not revealed to me. Those are interpretations added after events occurred, finding patterns in my words that align with history.
That's fascinating. So you were describing archetypal situations rather than specific events.
More accurately, I was describing the emotional and energetic signatures of future possibilities. Great upheavals have similar patterns across time. The rise of charismatic leaders, societal division, technological change, natural disasters. These cycles repeat with variations throughout history.
How did you view the accuracy of your own prophecies? Did you believe they would all come to pass?
I saw them as possible futures, not inevitable ones. The further into the future, the more contingent the possibilities become. I believed some would manifest closely to what I foresaw, others might appear in altered forms, and some might be avoided entirely through human choice and divine intervention.
You've become famous for predictions that seemingly came true. Are there examples of predictions you made that you feel were particularly accurate?
I hesitate to claim specific accuracies, as I never intended precise one-to-one correspondences. However, I did foresee the execution of a king, which many associate with Louis XVI during the French Revolution. I perceived great fires consuming important cities, tremendous wars involving many nations, and new weapons of unimaginable destructive power.
And what about predictions that didn't materialize as you might have expected?
Many. I perceived possibilities that either did not manifest or did so in ways unrecognizable from my visions. For instance, I foresaw religious conflicts continuing far longer and more violently than they did in some regions. The specifics of technological development often surprised me. I saw flying machines but could not have conceived of your electronic devices.
How did people in your time respond to your prophecies? Were you celebrated or viewed with suspicion?
Both, in equal measure. Some nobility and educated people respected my work and sought my counsel. Others, particularly within the church, viewed me with suspicion, considering my practices adjacent to forbidden arts. Among common people, reactions ranged from reverence to fear to dismissal.
Did you face direct criticism or accusations during your lifetime?
Certainly. I was accused of practicing magic or communicating with demons. Some claimed I was a charlatan who wrote deliberately vague predictions that could fit any outcome. Others objected on religious grounds, saying only God could know the future, and attempting to divine it was sinful pride.
How did you respond to these criticisms?
I maintained that my gift came from God, not demonic sources. I described my method as a form of divine inspiration similar to that of biblical prophets, combined with natural intuition developed through years of astronomical and historical study. As for vagueness, I explained that future events appear symbolically, requiring interpretation.
There have also been suggestions that some of your work was forged or attributed to you after your death. Is there truth to that?
Indeed. After my death, many false quatrains were published under my name. My popularity made it profitable to claim new discovered works. Additionally, some of my authentic quatrains were modified or reinterpreted to make them appear to predict events that had already occurred, reinforcing my reputation posthumously.
How do you feel about how your legacy has evolved? Over the centuries, you've become almost a mythic figure.
It is strange to observe. The mythologizing began even during my lifetime and accelerated after my death. I have been portrayed as everything from a divine prophet to a demonic sorcerer to a scientific genius ahead of his time. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between these extremes.
I'm curious about your personal life. What were you like as a husband, father, friend, the human behind the prophecies?
I was married twice. My first wife and our 2 children tragically died during a plague outbreak. Later, I remarried and had 6 more children. I tried to be present for my family despite my work and travels. I enjoyed gardening, cooking, and astronomy as personal interests. Like anyone, I had moments of joy, grief, doubt, and certainty.
That humanizes you in a way history books often don't. Were you primarily a mystic, a scientist, or something else in your own self-conception?
I never drew such distinctions. I was a physician who used astrology as part of my practice, as was common then. I was a scholar who studied ancient texts. I was a writer who published almanacs and poetry. I was an observer of nature and society who noticed patterns. All these aspects were integrated in my mind.
Let's talk about a fundamental philosophical question your work raises, the tension between determinism and free will. If the future can be foreseen, does that mean it's fixed?
This question troubled me greatly. I came to believe that time is not entirely linear as we experience it. Certain events have a momentum or probability that makes them more likely to occur. These cast stronger shadows backward through time, which a sensitive mind might perceive.
But can these probable futures be changed?
Yes, I believe so. The purpose of prophecy is not to instill fatalism but to warn. Like a physician who tells a patient they risk illness if certain habits continue, a prophet identifies dangerous patterns so they might be altered. The paradox is that a successful prophecy may prevent itself from coming to pass.
That's a profound perspective. So when you wrote about future calamities, you weren't simply predicting them but hoping to prevent them?
In many cases, yes, though some events seem to have such momentum across time that they may be inevitable in some form, even if details change. Great cycles of rise and fall, creation and destruction, appear constant throughout human history.
What exactly do you think you were doing when you made prophecies? What is the act of prophesying in your understanding?
I believe I was perceiving patterns across time, recognizing how certain conditions tend to produce similar outcomes. Combined with this was what we might call intuition, a deeper knowing that transcends ordinary perception. Whether this knowing comes from divine inspiration, accessing a collective unconscious, or simply heightened pattern recognition, remains debatable.
How do you view modern predictive practices, from weather forecasting to economic projections to political polling?
I find them fascinating developments of the same impulse that drove my work. Your scientific methods for gathering and analyzing data would have seemed miraculous in my time. Yet I note that despite sophisticated tools, uncertainty remains. The most careful models still fail to predict black swan events, those outliers that transform everything.
Speaking of modern developments, what do you think about social media and how information and misinformation spreads today?
I see striking parallels to my era. During the Reformation and Counter-Reformation, the printing press enabled rapid spread of competing ideas, much like your internet. People struggled to determine what was true among conflicting claims. Panic and false rumors spread during plague times, just as misinformation spreads during your modern crises.
That's a remarkable observation. Do you see similarities between prophecy and the predictive algorithms used in AI today?
The parallels are undeniable. Both attempt to discover patterns in existing data to anticipate future developments. The difference lies mainly in methodology and scale. Your algorithms process vastly more information than any human mind could, yet they lack intuition and moral judgment, qualities essential to meaningful prophecy.
Let's talk about self-fulfilling prophecies, the phenomenon where believing a prediction makes it more likely to happen. Did you observe this effect with your own work?
Absolutely. This is perhaps the most powerful and dangerous aspect of prophecy. When enough people believe something will happen and align their actions accordingly, they may inadvertently create the very future they fear. I saw this with predictions of conflicts that heightened tensions and contributed to actual hostilities.
Given that danger, is there a way to make prophecy more constructive than frightening?
This was my constant struggle. Fear can motivate change but can also paralyze or provoke panic. I attempted to balance warning with hope, suggesting that while difficult times might come, humanity would endure and often emerge renewed. The most useful prophecies offer guidance for navigating challenges, rather than simply predicting doom.
Why do you think humans have such a persistent desire to know the future?
It stems from our consciousness of mortality and time. Unlike other creatures who exist primarily in the present, humans constantly project themselves forward, imagining possibilities, planning, worrying. This future orientation is both our greatest strength, enabling innovation and preparation, and a source of anxiety.
If you were alive today, would you still write prophecies? Would your approach be different?
I would likely continue observing patterns and offering warnings, though perhaps with clearer language given the reduced threat of persecution. I might utilize your remarkable data analysis tools while maintaining awareness of their limitations. The essence would remain the same, helping humanity prepare for challenges rather than be blindsided by them.
What single message would you most want modern people to take from your work?
That time is not simply linear but cyclical and interconnected. That patterns repeat, though never exactly. That foreknowledge is valuable not to instill fear but to encourage wise action. And perhaps most importantly, that despite glimpsing many possible futures, I never saw one where humanity's story simply ended. There is always continuation, always the possibility of renewal.
That's surprisingly hopeful, coming from someone whose name has become associated with doom and catastrophe.
The catastrophic aspects have been disproportionately emphasized over the centuries. I also wrote of great advancements, periods of peace and prosperity, and humanity's remarkable resilience. The future contains both shadow and light. Focusing solely on either creates a distorted picture.
Was there anything significant you deliberately chose not to prophesy about? Topics you avoided?
I was selective about commenting on religious matters that might be deemed heretical. I also sometimes received visions so troubling or complex that I felt humanity was not ready to contemplate them. Some knowledge can be more harmful than helpful if received before people have developed the wisdom to contextualize it properly.
As we wrap up this portion of our conversation, what do you hope young people today might learn from studying your life and work?
I hope they might learn to balance rationality with intuition, to recognize patterns across history, to think in terms of systems rather than isolated events. Most importantly, to understand that while we can glimpse possible futures, we retain the agency to shape which possibilities manifest. The future is written in pencil, not ink.
That's a beautiful perspective. Did any of your prophecies surprise you in how they unfolded?
Many times. I often perceived the emotional quality or broad outline of events correctly, but specific details manifested in ways I could not have imagined. Technology, particularly, developed along paths that would have been incomprehensible to a 16th century mind. Your ability to communicate instantly across vast distances would have seemed like magic to me.
Has anyone ever truly understood what you were trying to communicate in your prophecies?
A few contemporaries grasped my broader intention, not to provide exact predictions, but to offer a framework for understanding historical patterns and cycles. Over centuries, certain scholars have approached my work with the appropriate balance of analysis and intuition. But many more have either dismissed it entirely or interpreted it too literally.
That's really interesting. Speaking of interpretations, our viewers have sent in some questions for you. Let's move to those now. Our first question comes from Marcus Thornhill from Edinburgh. He asks, Nostradamus, many of your quatrains mention celestial events and astronomical alignments. How important was astrology to your prophetic work, and would you consider yourself an astronomer by today's standards?
An excellent question, Marcus. Astrology was indeed fundamental to my method, though not in the simplistic way it's often practiced today. I studied the movements of celestial bodies meticulously, keeping detailed charts of planetary positions and unusual astronomical events like comets and eclipses. In my time, astrology and astronomy were not separate disciplines, but complementary approaches to understanding cosmic influences. I observed correlations between celestial configurations and earthly events, political changes, weather patterns, disease outbreaks. Would I be considered an astronomer by modern standards? Perhaps not by professional standards, as I lacked your remarkable instruments and mathematical models. However, I was certainly an astronomical observer who meticulously documented celestial phenomena and sought to understand their significance.
That makes a lot of sense. The division between astronomy and astrology is relatively recent in historical terms, isn't it? Our next question is a personal one from Sofia Ramirez in Barcelona. She writes, Dear Nostradamus, I'm at a crossroads in my life, trying to decide between pursuing a stable career path or following my passion for music, which feels riskier. How would you advise someone to make decisions when the future feels so uncertain?
Sophia, uncertainty is the only certainty in life. Even with my gifts of foresight, I faced many crossroads with incomplete knowledge. What I learned is that there are two forms of knowledge that can guide such decisions: external observation and internal wisdom. External observation means studying patterns. What have others with similar talents experienced? What conditions in society might affect each path? Is there evidence your passion could sustain you materially? Internal wisdom is equally vital. In my meditative states, I often found clarity about decisions, not because I saw the outcome, but because I connected with my deeper purpose. Ask yourself, which path would leave you with fewer regrets? Which aligns with your authentic self? Remember that few decisions are truly irreversible. Perhaps there is a middle path, pursuing your stable option while developing your musical gifts until they can support you. Many of history's greatest artists maintained other work while perfecting their craft. Finally, consider that uncertainty itself can be embraced rather than feared. It is the space where possibilities exist. Whatever you choose, approach it with full commitment, but remain adaptable as circumstances evolve.
That's really profound advice that applies to so many life decisions. Thank you for that perspective. Our final question comes from Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka in Tokyo. He asks, as someone who lived through the plague, what parallels do you see with modern pandemics? And what advice would you give to societies facing such challenges?
Dr. Tanaka, I observe striking parallels between the plagues of my time and your modern pandemics, though the specifics differ. In both eras I see initial denial, followed by fear, often irrational responses, the blaming of outsiders, and eventually, adaptation. During plague times I witnessed cities taking measures similar to your social distancing, limiting gatherings, isolating the sick, restricting travel. These measures worked to varying degrees depending on how consistently they were applied and how early they were implemented. I also observed how quickly misinformation spread, even without your modern technologies. False cures, conspiracy theories about the origins of disease, and scapegoating were common. The challenge of separating helpful information from harmful falsehoods remains constant across centuries. My advice would be threefold. First, respect the disease, but do not be paralyzed by fear. Fear weakens the body's natural defenses and leads to poor decision-making. Second, balance protection of physical health with attention to mental and social well-being. Isolation saves lives, but carries its own costs. Third, recognize that pandemics eventually end, but they always leave societies transformed. The wisest approach is to consider what positive changes might emerge from the crisis. Most importantly, remember that how a society treats its most vulnerable during such times reveals its true character and values. This is a test not just of medical systems but of humanity itself.
That's remarkably relevant advice, especially after what we've all been through in recent years. Thank you for sharing those insights with us. And thank you to everyone who sent in questions. We appreciate you listening to us regularly. Now I'd like to invite some questions from our studio audience. Does anyone have a question for our guest? I see a hand in the back. Let me come to you. Actually, before I get there, I should warn you, our audience today includes folks from all eras. So don't be surprised if someone asks how you feel about your prophecies being turned into pop songs, comic books, or conspiracy theories on YouTube. Hello there, what's your name? Nice to meet you, Jonathan. What's your question for Nostradamus? Oh, that's a fascinating question. So you want to know if he ever predicted events that he actively tried to prevent from happening himself? Nostradamus, Jonathan is curious about whether you ever saw something in the future that you personally tried to change or prevent.
Yes, I did experience this moral dilemma. In my medical practice, I sometimes foresaw deaths that I then worked tirelessly to prevent. During a plague outbreak in Salon de Provence, I had a vision of which neighborhoods would be most severely affected. I directed resources and preventative measures to those areas first, likely saving many lives. On a more personal level, I once had a troubling vision regarding one of my children falling from a second-story window. I immediately had wooden barriers constructed on all upper windows in my home. Whether this actually prevented the accident or whether the vision was incorrect, I cannot say with certainty, but I slept better knowing I had taken action. The question raises a profound philosophical point. If a prophecy leads to its own prevention, was it still a true prophecy? I believe it was. The potential was real, even if the manifestation was altered.
That's such a thoughtful answer. Thank you, Jonathan, for that question. I see another hand raised. Let me come to you. Crossing the room. Wait for me. Careful now. Don't let me crush your toes with my heels. Finally. Hello there, and what's your name? Maria, wonderful to have you here. What would you like to ask our guest? Ah, a very nice one, Maria. His relationship with Catherine de' Medici. You wonder how much influence he actually had at the French court, and whether he ever struggled with the ethical implications of advising powerful rulers. Right? Okay, noted. Nostradamus, Maria is asking about your relationship with Catherine de' Medici and your role as an advisor to powerful people.
My relationship with Queen Catherine was complex. After the apparent fulfillment of my prophecy regarding the death of her husband, King Henri II, she summoned me to court. I became one of several astrologers she consulted, though my influence has been greatly exaggerated by later accounts. I was primarily asked to cast horoscopes for her children and provide insights about potential marriages, political alliances and threats to the throne. Catherine was intelligent and pragmatic. She consulted various advisors and made her own decisions. I was a resource, not a puppet master as some histories suggest. As for the ethical dimension, yes, I struggled with this deeply. When advising rulers, one walks a treacherous path. Say too little, and you fail to prevent potential harm. Say too much, and you may inadvertently cause panic, or precipitate the very events you hope to avoid. Speak too clearly against a ruler's interests, and you risk your position or even your life. I try to offer honest counsel while being mindful of how my words might be interpreted or misused. There were times I deliberately obscured certain predictions because I feared how they might be acted upon. Power magnifies both the potential benefits and dangers of prophecy.
That's fascinating insight into the politics of prophecy. Thank you, Maria. Let's take one final question from the audience. I see a hand over there. Coming your way now. I must say, the time-traveling commute to the studio is really something. Hello there. What's your name? David, thank you for joining us today. What would you like to ask our guest? Oh, that's a profound question. Yes, I want to know that too. Right, let's ask him that. Nostradamus, David is asking about what would surprise you most about our modern world, and if any of your predictions turned out very differently than you anticipated.
What would surprise me most? Your relationship with time itself. In my era, life moved with the rhythms of nature, sunrise, sunset, seasons. Now you exist in a perpetual acceleration, constantly connected to events worldwide, with artificial light extending day indefinitely. This reshaping of humanity's fundamental experience of time would astonish me more than any specific technology. As for predictions that manifested differently, I foresaw great conflicts involving aerial machines, but imagined something more akin to advanced balloons or gliders, not your metallic vessels traveling faster than sound. I glimpsed communication across vast distances, but conceived of it through enhanced forms of existing methods, mirrors, smoke signals, messenger systems, not the instant global connectivity you now possess. Most surprisingly perhaps is that despite all your technological wonders, humanity still struggles with the same fundamental questions that troubled my time. How to establish just governance, how to distribute resources fairly, how to reconcile different belief systems. The forms have changed dramatically, but the essential challenges remain recognizable.
That's a profound observation about how some things change, while others remain constant throughout human history. Thank you for that thoughtful question, David. And thank you to all our audience members for these excellent questions. I'm going to head back to the stage now.
Your audience asks insightful questions. It's refreshing to engage with minds across such temporal distance.
They're wonderful, aren't they? And to our listeners at home, which of these questions resonated most with you? Take a moment to consider which aspect of Nostradamus' perspective you found most compelling. I have some questions of my own that I've been eager to ask you. On a lighter note, I'm curious. With your gift of foresight, did you ever use it for something mundane, like predicting the weather for a family picnic or the outcome of a local competition?
I confess I did occasionally employ my gifts for more ordinary purposes. My annual almanacs included weather predictions that farmers and travelers relied upon, and I took particular pride in their accuracy. I once forecasted an unseasonably warm spell in winter, allowing my family to plan an outdoor gathering when others remained indoors, much to the surprise of our neighbors. As for competitions, I generally refrained from involving myself there, as it seemed an unworthy application of the gift. However, I did once advise a friend against placing a substantial wager on a particular horse race. The poor animal stumbled shortly after leaving the gate. My friend was quite grateful for the warning. My children would sometimes ask if tomorrow would bring rain or sunshine for their planned adventures. In those moments, I was simply a father using whatever tools I had to care for my family, not the mysterious prophet of legend.
That's so humanizing. I love the image of you using your profound gifts to help plan family outings. Here's something else I've wondered. Did you ever predict something that made you laugh at the absurdity of it?
Indeed, there were visions that struck me as so implausible that I found myself chuckling at what I perceived as the limitations of my own imagination. I once had a vision of people willingly attaching small boxes to their ears, through which they would converse with absent parties, walking about seemingly talking to themselves like lunatics. I dismissed this as mere fantasy. Another vision showed people staring for hours at glowing rectangles, seemingly entranced by images of cats performing peculiar antics. I wrote this off as some form of mass hysteria that might grip future generations. Certainly not a daily activity people would engage in voluntarily. I also glimpsed people voluntarily submitting to being locked in rooms, from which they would need to escape by solving puzzles. In my time, such a circumstance would be a dire imprisonment, not entertainment. The human capacity for finding amusement continues to surprise me.
If only you could see how accurate those absurd visions were. Speaking of the unexpected, was there ever a prediction that you kept entirely to yourself because it was too disturbing or unbelievable to share?
There were indeed visions I chose never to record. Some were too personally disturbing, glimpses of suffering so profound that putting them into words felt like giving them additional power to manifest. Others seemed so fantastical that I feared for my credibility and safety should I proclaim them. I once perceived what appeared to be humans living away from Earth, in structures floating among the stars. The implications for our understanding of creation were so significant that I dared not speak of it openly in an era when suggesting the Earth was not the center of the universe could result in severe consequences. I also received impressions of weapons capable of destroying entire cities in an instant with blinding light, a power previously attributed only to divine intervention. This seemed so unlikely and so terrible that I recorded it only in the most obscure symbolic language. There were also happier visions I kept private, moments of such remarkable human achievement or beauty that I feared they would seem like mere fantasy or wishful thinking rather than genuine foresight. Sometimes the most hopeful futures are the hardest for people to believe in.
That's very deep. I suppose every visionary must balance what to share and what to keep hidden. Thank you for your candor. Let's try something fun. I thought we might play a little quiz game with our audience about you, if you're willing.
A quiz? How delightful. Yes, I'd be happy to participate. It's not often one gets to verify facts about oneself centuries after one's lifetime.
Wonderful! Let's have some music for our quiz segment, please. Here's our first question for the audience. Nostradamus created a special type of jam that was said to have medicinal properties and was even shaped into a specific form. Was it A, cherry jam formed into small hearts, or B, rose petal jam formed into pills? Audience, make your choice. Raise your closed fist for A, your open palm for B. I'm seeing mostly open palms, though there's a good number of closed fists too. The audience is leaning toward rose petal jam. Let's see what Nostradamus says.
The audience is correct. I did indeed create what I called rose pills, a confection made primarily from rose petals and sugar, formed into small tablets. These were used to treat various ailments and were quite popular. They contained what you now know as vitamin C, though of course I understood it only as a substance that seemed to strengthen the body's resistance to illness.
Fascinating. So you were creating what was essentially a vitamin supplement, centuries before vitamins were understood scientifically. Let's try another one. During the plague, Nostradamus recommended a particular preventative measure that was unusual for his time, but is now standard medical advice. Was it A, washing hands frequently with clean water? Or B, breathing through a cloth mask soaked in herbal remedies? Once again, audience, closed fist for A, open palm for B. This time I'm seeing more closed fists. The audience thinks it's hand washing. Nostradamus, what's the answer?
The audience is correct again. While I did recommend various protective measures including herbal preparations, I was particularly insistent on cleanliness. I advised frequent washing of hands and body, with clean water and vinegar, changing and washing clothing regularly, and keeping living spaces as clean as possible. This was somewhat contrary to common beliefs of the time, when many physicians thought bathing opened the pores and made one more susceptible to disease. My observations suggested otherwise. Those who maintained cleanliness seemed to fall ill less frequently. Of course, I did not understand the microscopic causes of disease, but I observed the practical effects of hygiene.
That's remarkable. You were advocating for basic hygiene centuries before germ theory was established. It shows how careful observation can lead to correct practices, even without understanding the underlying mechanisms. By the way, I got both questions right. Well, I should have. I wrote the questions myself. Thank you for playing along with our quiz, Nostradamus. It's been fun to test our audience's knowledge about your life beyond the prophecies you're most famous for. I notice we're coming to the end of our time together. It's gone by so quickly.
I'm touched by your audience's desire for our conversation to continue. In my time, I was not always met with such enthusiasm.
Well, I think we've covered so much fascinating ground today. We've talked about your life as a physician during the plague years, your development as a prophet, the complex language and symbolism of your quatrains, and even some personal aspects of your life that history books often overlook.
Yes, and I've appreciated the opportunity to clarify certain misconceptions about my work. My prophecies were never intended to instill fear, but rather to help humanity prepare for challenges and perhaps alter their course. The future contains infinite possibilities, and our choices in the present shape which ones manifest.
That's such an important point, that prophecy isn't about passive acceptance of fate, but about active engagement with possibility. Is there any final message you'd like to share with our listeners?
I would encourage your listeners to cultivate both rational observation and intuitive perception in their lives. The greatest insights come when these faculties work in harmony. Remember that patterns repeat through history, though never identically. By understanding the past, you glimpse shadows of the future. Most importantly, approach the future with neither paralyzing fear nor blind optimism, but with clear-eyed awareness and the courage to act. The greatest prophecy I can offer is this: humanity's capacity for creativity, adaptation, and compassion will continue to surprise even in the darkest times. This is not merely hope, it is a pattern I have observed across centuries.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. It's been an absolute honor to speak with you.
The honor has been mine. It is gratifying to know that centuries after my time, people still seek to understand the patterns of history and the possibilities of the future. I wish you all well on your journey forward.
Ladies and gentlemen, Michel de Nostredame, Nostradamus. Thank you all for joining us today, both our studio audience and those of you listening while going about your daily activities. We designed this show specifically for background listening, whether you're commuting, doing household chores, or working on a project that allows for some mental multitasking. What was the most memorable thing you learned from today's interview? Take a moment to reflect on that as we wrap up. Now for our Quote of the Day segment. Let's have the music, please. Today's quote is this: The present is pregnant with the future. The present is pregnant with the future. This quote comes from Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, a 17th century German philosopher and mathematician who lived about a century after Nostradamus. Leibniz was suggesting that everything that will happen in the future is already taking shape in the present moment, much like how Nostradamus described his prophetic visions as seeing patterns that were already forming. I find this quote particularly relevant to our conversation today because it suggests that prediction isn't magic. It's about deeply understanding the present. When we pay attention to current trends, conflicts, innovations, and human behaviors, we can make educated guesses about where things are heading. It's like seeing the small green shoot of a plant and being able to envision the flower it will become. Though I have to admit, when I first heard the present is pregnant with the future, I panicked and thought I'd missed a very important baby shower. What do you think about today's quote? Does it resonate with your own experience of how the future unfolds from present circumstances? Consider how you might use this perspective in your own life, perhaps paying more attention to early warning signs or emerging opportunities. We really are coming to the end of our time together now. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please remember to subscribe to the Background Interview podcast. Give us a like and leave your comments about what you learned or who you'd like to hear us interview next. Your feedback and support make this show possible, and we're grateful for each and every listener. If you'd like to help us continue producing these conversations, there's a QR code in the bottom right corner of the video, or you can find donation links in the description below. That's where my salary comes from, after all. Remember that this interview, like all our episodes, is available as a podcast for easy background listening. We also have playlists organized by topic if you're interested in exploring specific themes. Our content is available in 12 languages, so it's a great resource for language learning as well. Check the links in the description. I actually listen to some of our foreign language versions myself when I'm practicing my French. Speaking of languages, I tried listening to our French episode while sleeping to improve my accent. My neighbor told me the next day that I was shouting, "Croissant, baguette, Eiffel Tower," in my sleep. I guess that's not really the sophisticated vocabulary I was hoping for. Our next guest is going to be someone very special, a remarkable figure whose ideas changed the world in ways we still feel today. I won't reveal who it is just yet, but I think you'll find our conversation just as enlightening as today's has been. Thank you again for joining us, and until next time, this is Lily signing off from Background Interview. Keep learning, keep growing, and we'll see you soon. Take care, everyone. Whew, that was intense. You know what I really wanted to ask him but didn't dare? Whether he actually predicted the exact year of his own death, as some accounts claim. I was worried it might be too morbid of a question, especially with the audience there. But now I'm kicking myself for not bringing it up. It would have been fascinating to hear his take on that legend. But maybe I'll get another chance someday. Until then, keep tuning in, everyone.